So many years ago, and I can't even remember how many years ago. This has got to have been 10 or 15 years ago. Anyway, it's early in the morning. It's a beautiful spring day. It's one of those mornings you're just happy to be alive. And I'm driving down the road. And off in the distance, I see this guy walking.
Mm-hmm.
And he only has one arm. And I think to myself, wow, good for him. He's got only one arm, but he's out there walking and getting a little exercise. And I get close to him, and I can see he's, wearing sneakers and a t-shirt and shorts, and
Mm-hmm.
the next thing I notice is he's got kind of grayish hair, kind of like mine, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, oh, maybe he lost. He's about my age. Maybe he lost his arm in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm really admiring the guy. I mean, he lost his arm in Vietnam. He's up early in the morning getting some exercise. And I've got this whole story going on in my head about the one armed Vietnam vet who's getting exercise.
Uh-huh.
And you could probably guess where this goes. So, so I drive by and I look up in my rear view mirror. He's got two arms. He's scratching his back.
He's just having a nice leisurely back scratch walk, like we all do.
And so this
That's
leads
funny.
me to this concept
Right.
that this is a trick of the ego mind. In this case, it's relatively benign. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not
But it is a story weaver and it's a good example.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so your brain's ego tricks you into thinking you see reality. And I was convinced I did, but it's just a narrow survival driven view. And we're going to discuss why that is and how it happens. And we're going to discover how mindfulness in the moment shifts you from thinking to knowing the truth.
Yeah.
And I use that story quite a bit with my clients. And they laugh just like you did because it's just so
Yeah.
silly.
But it shows the point.
Yeah,
I
it
wish
really
there was
does.
some way you could have like stopped and put your window down and just been like, we've been through a lot together. And then you just drive on, just leave him wondering, like, what?
We've been through a lot together.
Yeah,
Oh,
like,
that's
thank you for teaching me so much
well. If
in the
I'd have
time
been
we
female, that might have been okay, but he he could have been packing for all I know, and
Fair
that
enough. Could be a little disgruntling, maybe.
I might have been a little more threatening than you might have been in a similar circumstance.
Well, I guess there's really no way to find out. Welcome to Mastering Thought, everyone. We invite you to soar with us. Mark and I practice and teach mindfulness and awakening. Like we have lived our awakenings, and we want to help more people do that. The result is just that you get to be in charge more often. You don't get carried off with your non conscious patterns that make your life more uncomfortable and unpleasant. So here we are. Come grab
It,
a seat.
it's a good metaphor because really what it does, it pulls you out of the drama.
Yeah.
You
Our
know,
brains like abduct us into these different non conscious patterns. And then when you're in that state, it's really hard to have control over yourself.
and by the way, before we move on here, we have an online community called Thought Masters,
Mhm.
and obviously we'd like you to like and subscribe. But we're pretty good on subscribers. We'd love to have you part of our community, but we need watch hours, and there are going to be a couple end cards at the end of this for additional videos, and we'd love to have you stay on and watch those
Yeah, explore your
because
interests.
they go into the concepts from a different angle.
And we're pretty good about comments too. So even if it's kind of an older one, older video, feel free to share your thoughts. We really love carrying the conversation forward. And sometimes it turns into the next episode. So
That's
share
true.
away.
That is true. So, perception leads to chaos. And so, we're going to be talking about the difference between perception and perspective.
Yeah.
and perspective leads to clarity.
And we're going to define those pretty well, right?
That's where we're going right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
I
and
like a
let
good
me,
word definition.
what's that?
I said I like a good word definition.
So I look like I'm jumping around. I just want to say Christina and I are kind of in the same neighborhood, but we have just a very slight delay that trips us up. So please be
Yeah.
patient with us if we get on top of one another here. Okay, so what is mindfulness? And here are some ideas that goes along with this. And our next video is going to be specifically on present moment mindfulness.
Whoop, whoop.
But it's a present moment focus, non-judgmental awareness, acceptance, observation. Open. I think these concepts are so important. Openness, and curiosity.
I cannot agree more. So I didn't express this in our intro, but Mark's been a marriage and family therapist for over 25 years. I've done massage and body work, specifically craniosacral therapy, massage for 20 years and cranio for like 6. And one thing, if you're not familiar with that type of body work, is it does usher in, it sort of like guides you into experiencing this new mindfulness because of what it does to your nervous system. And almost always when people get more relaxed, they have more open-mindedness and more curiosity about the events of their life and what their life potential could be.
Wow.
And so like seeing you put that in mindfulness is like a big amen from me. Yes. Yes, openness and curiosity.
So you've been doing therapy for 20 years.
Massage therapy, yeah.
You must have started when you were 13. Is that correct?
Started right out of high school and then went to a school that focused on that. And I was like done within a year of graduating high school.
That's interesting. That's a first career for you. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I love
Uh,
it. The
all
body's
right. So our
amazing.
goal today is to explain how moment mindfulness transforms perception. What you feel and think something is, that's perception, into perspective, which is knowing what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to
Mm-hmm.
see that these come
Right.
from completely different parts of the brain.
Right.
So here's a simple moment mindfulness exercise, and please do it with us. Just notice the next thought. That's being mindful, isn't it? Really, in a sense, mindfulness is the activity of noticing your own mental activity.
Right. Like
So
stepping
just
back as an
notice the next
observer.
thought, and as you notice the next thought preferably is something simple like, "Oh, I need to get my hair cut on Saturday," or you know, "Time for me to trim my mustache."
Mine was literally, it's time to think of the next thought.
There you go.
Or
So
it's
what
time to notice
happens?
the next
What happens to the voice in your head, which is a thought, when you simply observe it? And you will find that every time you observe a thought, it stops. The voice in your head goes away.
thought.
So keep that in mind as we go through this. All right, so let's define perception. Perception is basically thinking and feeling. And it starts in the limbic system, which is fight or flight, specifically the amygdala. And then there is a threat assessment based on childhood memories, which is organized by the hippocampus.
Mm.
And that triggers self-referential narrative, like, how does this affect me? And that comes from the default mode network. And we're going to see in a minute how this works in the brain. And this is
Talk
to a
about
large,
abduction.
what's that?
So talk about abduction. These three together are like the abducting team.
Yeah, it's very much sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a moment about the default mode network. Now, the default mode network is becoming more and more popular. It's not like we're trying to turn you into brainiacs, but we're learning a lot about the default mode network, and it is a set of brain regions that are active when a person is at rest, not focused on in the external environment. So when you're focused, the default mode network is not active. But when you're at rest, the narrative in your head starts up right away. It's like the brain's idle setting kicking in during daydreaming, self-reflection, or when you're just letting your mind wander. In other words, it's the story of me in the head in the world with a distinct sense of self.
Yeah.
And I want to
And
show you where. Go ahead.
I just want to share a little bit with people. I've never shared this on the channel before, but I feel ready. I have level 1 autism, and learning about the default mode network and learning about some of the components in it has been the key for me to handle my emotional dysregulation. And
Wow.
so I want to make sure that for those of you listening, like, you might be on the spectrum, or you might have people in your life on the spectrum. And this was very freeing for me. This made a lot more possible for me. So anyway, carry on,
Just
Mark.
summarize that in one sentence, what you just said. It was very important.
Learning about these components in the brain
Oh,
and why they were taking me into these patterns when I was reactive has been the key to me no longer having that power over me.
excellent. So let's take a look at perception and thinking and feeling and where it comes from. And so here's my crude little diagram of the brain. And this is the limbic system, all this right here. And this is fight or flight. This is the amygdala. And somewhere in here is the hippocampus. I'm not sure it shows up very well here. Over here is called the ACC. It's the cingulate cortex. And then right here is the medial prefrontal cortex. Okay, why is this important? Because the function of these parts of the brain, and you notice they're all kind of adjacent to one another, what they do is they create the story of me.
Yeah.
And this is what we call the ego. So perception comes from the ego mind. And
Right.
it starts right here with fight or flight. So this is all about survival. So perception is a survival mechanism. But you didn't know that.
Right.
So
We are
what if you're
so
not
sold on the story. We're
what if
so sold by the story.
what if you're not surviving anything but you try to survive something anyway? Big problem.
Right. Right. I mean, I think that, there's a lot of people that might fall into that camp that don't realize, like, they can
Mm-hmm.
live life in a way that they have felt safe. They can feel safe and supported and live their everyday life.
Well, and part of the problem here is this whole area of the brain is predisposed to telling you a story that you're not safe.
Right. Yeah,
Or
because
you're
it's trying to get away from any potential threat when
That's right.
life is a little harder.
That's
But
true for unicorns.
yeah. Okay, it's true for just unicorns.
Well, it's more true for unicorns, but what's true for lions, if you're a lion, is this part of your brain is predisposed to expect criticism being put down and not being accepted.
Not being accepted. Right.
And,
Right.
and
That's how you survive the most.
we will
You can.
put a link to another video on the lion and unicorn if you're not familiar with that. It's my model of relationships, and that's what we're referring to there. Okay.
It's a good one. Yeah.
Sorry, so many interruptions. So perception is subjective, driven by ego-based thoughts and feelings, which is really about the default mode network. By the way, the default mode network is the part of the brain that shuts down when you take psychedelics.
Right. And it's
And
also the part of your brain that shuts down when we do that thought watching, that moment mindfulness we just did.
that's right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it has that in common, and this is why.
Probably why both lead to an awakening. What are you going to say?
Well, I think if people took psychedelics with the right expectation, they would awaken.
Yeah.
I don't think the therapists that are working with them oftentimes, or the group, or the ayahuasca retreat or whatever, understand that when the default mode network shuts off, there's an opportunity for a spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And if they set that
Sure.
expectation up, I think people would experience more of it.
Mm-hmm. You're like lining up the dominoes so they can fall.
Right, because
Awareness is like lining up dominoes. The more you know, the more dominoes you have to knock over, you know?
well, they've done a lot of research recently on psychedelics, specifically psilocybin at Johns Hopkins, and they
Uh-huh.
found that the setting that the person is in and the way they're coached through the process by the therapist has a huge impact on the experience that they have.
I believe it. You know, like what your autonomic nervous system is doing is really important.
All right. So, perspective, on the other hand, we were looking at perception. This is really about the ego. It's narrow and it's usually false. So, your perception is usually not correct.
Yeah.
It misses reality's broader truth due to emotional filters. And those emotional filters are here, based
Mm-hmm.
on childhood experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's perception is driven by the remembered past and the imagined future.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I got to tell you, Christina, I'm not sure there's anybody on the internet or in any of the literature that's ever defined these things this way and tied them back to the brain the way we're doing today.
And tied them back to the brain. Yeah, maybe not. Yeah. If anything, it usually tends to go back to philosophy, not always like an anatomical breakdown of physically
Right.
what's happening. I really appreciate that.
Well, it gives you something solid to hold on to.
Yeah, and so much like, this stuff can dip into like the spiritual reality of being human. But what's hard about the spiritual experiences we have is they can feel so subjective, and like it's really hard to know so many things for certain. So like you feel these impacts, but it's so sometimes impossible to describe or to really, I don't know, I guess help other people see how they can be meaningful for them too.
I think in my practice working with people, and by the way, let me also say Christina is not a client of mine, never has been a client. We just met, we hit it off, we started this channel, and she started to do the exercises we talk about here, and she
Right.
experienced the awakening we're talking about,
Right.
along with lots of other changes in her life.
Yeah.
But
It's been a wild ride.
all right, so perspective is knowing what actually is. And when it
Yeah.
happens, you know it. You know what is real and what's not real. Perspective
Yeah.
is ego free, it's intuitive knowing of reality's true nature, and objective present moment awareness beyond thinking's biases. Would you agree that that's an accurate statement?
It seems really good, but it's really meaty. Like I want to read through it one more time and process it.
Okay.
Perspective is ego free, yes. Intuitive knowing, yes, of reality's true nature. And objective present moment awareness beyond thinking's biases. Yeah, because like when I'm in that experience of having perspective pop up, it's almost like I take a break from being the Christina I normally am on autopilot.
Right.
It's like despite who I am, these thoughts are leaking through. And I know that just like the thought watching, like when that voice goes away, it shows you that that voice isn't really you. And it's the same with living life. Like when those moments pop up, I realize the Christina that usually comes out isn't really the Christina that I have to be.
Excellent. Interesting. All right, let's go back to the last sentence here. The perspective, this is a typo, is from outside of ourselves, from others' point of view. So,
Right.
in essence, what I'm saying here is that when you have perspective, you can see other people's points of view, even if you don't agree with it.
Right.
You're like, oh, I
Right.
totally understand why they think that way. That makes perfect
Mm-hmm.
sense for them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is key when I'm doing couples therapy because I need to
Right.
get each person to see it from the other person's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a revelation.
Mm-hmm.
O- Okay, so let's look at some brain stuff for perspective. This is triggered by the task positive network. And the main node of the task positive network is the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, which I'll show you where it is in a moment, which is in charge of emotional control, present moment focus. And this is very important. When the task positive network is on, it suppresses the default mode network, turning off the ego momentarily.
Okay, let's pause here for a second. So I want to the last two bullets. I need to process those two. See, I need
Now,
my present moment focus.
now let me explain this in real simple
Yeah.
terms. Let's
Yeah.
say you're watching your favorite TV show.
Right.
There's no commentary going on in your head when you're watching your favorite TV show. Why
Yeah.
is that? Because you've turned on the task positive network,
Mm,
and that immediately suppresses the internal dialogue.
right.
So, in other words, you can't observe and focus and concentrate and think at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Those are mutually exclusive because these two networks, the TPN and the DMN, are negatively correlated.
Right. One's off when the other's on, more or
And I got
less.
criticized by somebody who knows neurology the other day. Well, it's really not off, but honestly, when the task positive network turns on, the voice in your head goes away, and that's what I would describe as off. So,
Yeah, for sure. For
anyway,
sure.
but I appreciated the heads up because I went back and looked at it again, and it enhanced my experience of life.
Yeah.
All right.
There's something in craniosacral therapy like that too, where it's actually your craniosacral system. It has this hydraulic um, pressure stat system and
Mm,
hydraulic system that pushes all the fluid from your brain down to your tailbone, like every 3 to 6 seconds. It does this revolution of pulling the fluid back and forth. And you can technically stop it by holding certain points of the body. And it is like an electrical reboot for your body. But
mm.
technically, you can't ever truly, truly stop it, but it gets imperceivable. And that's what we've switched our verbiage to is once it's imperceivable, that's when you've stopped it.
Okay, I'm tempted to say something like, reminds me of what happens when I eat chili dogs. But anyway, sorry. All
There's a
right, let's take
stopping.
a
It
look.
doesn't really stop.
So let's take a look at the brain again. So this part here is the ego mind that's talking to us with the default mode network of the brain involved, especially up here. This is the narrator, this area here. Now, perspective comes from the task positive network, and the main node of the task positive network is right here. Now, honestly, I'm not trying to be anatomically correct. It's either just general area. It's right at the top of the forehead in the front here.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, this is the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, and a
Okay.
good way of this is where perspective comes from, and this is where awareness without thought comes from.
Okay.
Okay, so now this is interesting. I didn't put this together for many years when I was working with this, but what happens when you've shifted in to the task positive network and you become the observer, you have this feeling like you're outside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And basically, you see reality without ego's filters.
Mm-hmm. Which is so refreshing.
And
And so much less energy.
it's a relief.
Yeah.
And so your ego in that moment, you're ego free, and this transcends me concerns, yielding, which mainly is concerned with survival, yielding universal truth.
Mhm.
So it's not and you have insight. This is where insight comes from, marked by aha moments of knowing.
Mhm.
And when people do the moment mindfulness exercise and they awaken, there is an aha moment of knowing, and what they know is they're not the voice in their head, and that's really what causes the awakening.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so, but I thought that was interesting, and now I tell my clients when they actually feel like they're outside of themselves, which I've been telling them for many years. Now I explain that that is the feeling when you shift into the prefrontal cortex up here.
Mhm.
It's called metacognition.
Mhm. Thinking about thinking.
And so here's the tool: reflection through self-observation, observing thought. That shifts you from thinking to knowing and involves discovering yourself as the observer, because awareness is the key.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
without this shift from thinking to knowing, from perception to perspective, there really is no awareness.
Right.
And the irony of this is the intellect will simulate awareness.
Sorry, my dog.
That's Christina's dog. Time for a treat. Are you still muted?
I was for a second. She seems to be quelled. If we want to look at this sweetheart who, come here, Sonny, sweetheart who
Oh,
has so much anxiety, this poor girl.
really?
Yeah, right, Sonny. Poor baby.
Sonny needs to do mushrooms.
Yeah, we've talked about it. She's just not sure she's ready. She doesn't want to have a bad trip.
There you go.
She
All
just gets
right.
this vision of like every dog getting her toys, but her all
Yeah.
her uh, all her bones, except she doesn't get to have poor girl.
Okay, so the paradox of mindfulness, we talked about metacognition a minute ago, which is the awareness of mental activity means that you are not your thoughts.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, presence emerges. Mindfulness is not redirecting awareness, which a lot of people struggle with. It is the experience of noticing what's left when thought is extinguished and awareness emerges.
So beautiful.
And I've got a slide that kind of shows that here in a second. Okay, so perception versus perspective. Believing perception leads to the prison of the mind and the belief that we
Yes.
are the voice in our heads.
Yeah. Which that's like what the whole new season of White Lotus is about. Like where they're going to that retreat center.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, like a spiritual retreat center kind of thing. And they would have loved to have heard what you said. They could have all lived, probably.
You know, everybody's watching White Lotus but me. I need to get caught up. Is that on HBO?
I think so. I've just heard about the latest season. I'm about to start watching it because of this whole thing with like the info that you give about how to become free from your what your brain believes is your personality.
Hmm. Well, maybe I should watch it. Sometimes I can't watch that stuff because I get like, wait a minute, they can't see it. Let me show it to them.
Yeah. They're not always going to be able to see it and they're not all going to live, Mark, okay?
I
This
get
is
it.
this is an Agatha Christie intense situation.
Wow. I love Agatha Christie.
I know, she's so campy and fun.
So, perception is the direct experience of life that is not time bound or the product of a point of view.
Yes. That's interesting you say not time bound because it really does feel like you're outside of time as well when you're
So,
in these
we
places.
we went through this in a series of videos we did a while back on quantum mechanics and the present moment, And I really sincerely believe that when you are in the task positive network, when you are in that awareness, there is no sensation of time at all
Yeah, like when you're in flow state.
because there is no time. There
Mm-hmm.
actually is only the present moment. And it's when we're outside of that in our ego, we experience the flow of time, which gives us the illusion that there is this progression of events happening.
So so that's so interesting on a spiritual like level, but obviously we have like these practical lives too. So my curiosity for you is, do you think we'd be a happier society if we didn't keep time?
Yeah, and I think actually time is an artifact of society, and it only became a factor a few hundred years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gentleman on the internet named Cliff High. Cliff has one F, who is kind of a guru, and he has a recent episode on his Substack about time. Actually, he was interviewed on a channel on Rumble called Beyond Mystic, and he
Mm-hmm.
talks about that.
Oh,
Kind of mind
interesting.
bending, far out, new agey kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Anyway, I thought I would take a risk here and sum this up by quoting a scripture. This is 1 Corinthians 13:12. Don't dial away yet. Wait a minute, this goes somewhere. For now we see through a glass darkly. I mean, who actually translated this? Good grief. But then face to face, now I know in part, but then I shall know even also as I am known. Okay, what does this really mean? What this means is, wait a minute, what happened to my, where did it go?
Uh-oh.
I don't know what happened to
Is it
my
not
slide.
like
Anyway,
connected by practicing mindfulness? No?
well, let me just look. No, I don't have the slide. What this really means
Shucks.
is we're looking through a dimly reflected mirror, but eventually we will be intensely knowing what we are facing directly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the difference between perception and perspective.
It's just like knowing it deeply.
Well, we've got
Or
something right
what
in front of us that we can't see because we're looking through a filter.
I see what you're saying.
And that's what Paul is saying. You know, we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
in Paul's day, mirrors were made of polished metal
Right.
and they were less than perfect. And so the reflection you were looking at was not the real image, it was a distorted image. And that's what he's
Right.
saying. We're looking at a distorted image, but at some point we will move from perception to perspective and we will see very clearly the intensity of what's right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Did I recover well enough from that?
I think so. I think it was good.
Okay. Let's see. By practicing moment mindfulness, we can observe perception's illusion, the voice in our head, and awaken to perspective's truth, a timeless, direct experience of life's essence. Now, the reason why I included these pictures was this, I think, on the bottom right is what typically happens when people practice mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they got smoke coming out of their ears because they're trying to relax and focus and breathe and do all this stuff. But when we practice what we teach on this channel, it's more like the girl on top. Do it with a sense of wonder and curiosity with your eyes open,
Mm-hmm.
noticing what's happening in your head.
Mm-hmm.
It takes kind of the steam engine out of the whole effort.
Totally. Yeah. You don't have to chug your way through it. It's actually very easy.
Now, we here at Mastering Thought have an online community called Thought Masters. You're welcome to Join us where we will help you go through these exercises and learn these principles. And there are other people on the community that have experienced the awakening we're talking about as well. So just scan the QR code. That will take you to a page, and there will be email addresses and information in the show notes, and we'll be happy to respond to anything that comes up for you.
Well, I like that episode, Mark.
Really?
Yeah.
Did that do something for you?
Yeah, I thought it was good. I like the pictures too.
Okay. I haven't stopped yet. We're still recording.
I know. I just wanted everybody to know that I thought you did a good job.
Okay. All right. Well, please watch. There are two end cards. They're coming on. They're right on top of us right now. Click one of them and watch some more. If you liked what you saw, like and subscribe, and check out our online community, Thought Masters. All right.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
All right. Sunny wants you to do it now.
I can hear her barking.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Bye-bye.